Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode. And this episode is episode 51 this week. And I have a very special guest with me this week, and her name is Stephanie, and she will be telling us all about her relationship with Chip. Stephanie, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much. It's really an honor that I found your podcast, and it's even greater an honor that you've invited me here today. Thank you.
Oh, you're so very welcome. I'm just excited for the listeners to hear all that you have to share with us. So I suppose let's go back to the beginning and kind of tell us a little bit about like the initial bond you shared with Chip and how did it all start? We'd love to know.
Sure. This was in 2007, and it dates it because I found an ad in a newspaper for beagle puppies. And we went out, and she was the smallest of the litter, and they were trying to push me to get her brother. And I said, no, I think she's the one. And so we brought her home, and I guess because she had been around so many other little ones, she ate so much that she threw up.
Oh,
So we had to limit the amount that she ate because she for the rest of her life. Because as a beagle, she was just always after food, always trying to eat, always motivated by food. But I got her when I had just finished graduate school, so I was 25 at the time and living in Atlanta. And I was living with a roommate, and boy, she would howl when I would leave her. And I got a note from someone in the apartment saying that I was violating the terms of my lease. And I had to get her to stop howling. So we went through it with the vet. We did behavior therapy, we did pheromones, and it finally came down to they said, you have to cut her voice box, get rid of her, or medicate her. And of the three, the only feasible option was to medicate her. And she ended up being on a Prozac, anxiety and depression medication that she had to take so that I could leave the house because she would follow me everywhere, every room I would go to. But it ended up that we did special blood tests every year to make sure that there were no ill side effects, and it worked wonders for her. She just was by my side all the time, such that I was scared to leave the house at first. And then
mm,
once we got into our groove and the medicine started working, I was able to feel like I could go to work without being scared that she would howl and bother the neighbors.
mm.
And then I moved to Miami. She, of course, came with me there. She loved being outside at the park and playing around in the sand by the water. And then we moved to DC, which was an inner city, which she thrived in as well, except she found many chicken bones on the street that I had to pry from
Oh,
her.
no.
And then I eventually said, no, I want her to have some more space. So I ended up buying a townhouse in the suburbs of DC and Virginia. And she had so much space, so much greenery. And my friends joke that I bought the place just so that she could have more green space and places to walk. But I really don't think I could have ever lived on my own. The years that I was alone in Atlanta, Miami, DC, I couldn't have done it without her. It was just so nice to come home to her presence after work every day and just look forward to being with her. And
Mm.
she was with me as a single person. She was with me when I started dating my husband, when I got married, and when I had my first child. So, I mean, she really was my first child, let's be honest.
Yeah.
But
Mm.
she was with me in every stage of my life. And she was just, I can't imagine my life in those years without her.
Oh, that's amazing. That is a long time and all those different stages of life as well to have your best friend there by your side. I can imagine. That was just amazing. And all the moves and everything. So
Yes.
would you consider that the challenging time would have been at the beginning, with putting her on the medication, that have been yeah.
That was hard because, I had just graduated and I was 25. So I was young and I was like taking on this, this child of mine, this first thing that I was ever having to care for on my
Hmm.
own. We'd had dogs growing up with my family, my parents, but this was the first time that I was in charge of another being's life.
Hmm.
And so I was like, I didn't know what to do because I wasn't getting rid of her, but I had to go to work.
Hmm.
So it was very challenging working with the vet, but in the end, the Prozac really helped to calm her so that she could live
Hmm.
in a safe way and not be so scared when I left the house. But another challenging time for me, at least, was during the pandemic
Mm.
and having her there. I guess her most challenging time was when I first left the house after being around her so frequently because I was studying for my board exam and I was frequently home. And then when I got a job and started working, she was like, "Well, where did Stephanie go?" But I think the most challenging time for me personally was in the pandemic. And of course, I think she lived a life of luxury then because I never really left.
Mm.
So having her there for me during that time was very, very helpful because I was pregnant. I couldn't be around people, especially because I was high risk. And she was always there, and we played and we snuggled up together. And on the mornings when I felt so sad because I'm a natural extrovert, love being around people, and all of that was shut off for me. So just she was there every second of the way. Oh, she was just lovely.
Mm. Especially with COVID, and I can obviously empathize with you there. COVID is such a difficult time when you're like trying to get, you're an extrovert and you're trying to like be locked up in your home and try to navigate all of that. But the fact that, she was with you there was amazing to kind of get you through. And would you think that when the times that you were home with her, would that kind of create like a stronger bond, or is it different times in your life that you felt the bond would have been stronger than others?
Certainly. I mean, when I lived in Atlanta and Miami, my family's from Virginia, so it's a flight away, it's not a drive.
Hmm.
And I lived on my own. There were times where I felt a bit lonely being single and saying, "Oh my goodness, like I'm here by myself." And I wanted to be with my mom and dad or be with some friends from home, and I couldn't because in order to do that, I had to hop on a flight. And I remember calling my mom upset or crying about whatever thing, and she said, "Just hold Chip. Just put Chip in the bed with you, cry with Chip, hold Chip." And so a lot of those times when times were rough and I was living farther away from home, it meant so much to have Chip right there by my side to bring comfort. And once I moved back to DC, it was about 100 miles from home, so it wasn't quite as far away.
Yeah.
But definitely the times when I was further away from my close friends and family, having her there
Hmm.
got me through. She was just an unbelievable comfort, always happy to see me, eager to be with me, never wanting to leave my side. And she just seeing her and touching her brought an immense comfort.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's just amazing what they can bring to our lives, I think. And how long was Chip a part of your life?
From June of 2007
Hmm.
until September 21st, 2023. And I
Mm.
remember the exact date because there's an Earth, Wind, and Fire song. I'm not sure if you know the band. It's a like a disco band from the 1970s from the United States. But there's a
Okay.
song, and the beginning of it is, "Do you remember the 21st night of September?" And it talks about how the stars stole the night away and how we knew our love was here to stay.
Mm.
And every time I hear that song, it makes me think of her. And it makes me think of how she entered heaven. I just think of it says the bells were ringing, and I just think of heaven's gates opening with bells ringing and honoring her presence into heaven. And my 3-year-old now, every time she hears the song, she says, "It's Chip's song. It's Chip's song."
Oh,
So she was with us until last year on September 21st.
so recent as
So
well.
16 years.
Oh
So it's
my
been
God.
about, yeah, a year and 3 months. I can't believe it's been so long.
Yeah, and it's so recent. And that story about the song is just incredible. Like I
Can
don't
you
think I've
believe it?
ever heard anything like that. It's
I
unbelievable.
couldn't believe that. I mean, we put her down. I wasn't thinking about it. The vet just said, I have this date available. And you know, we put her down, and then I don't even know when it was. I think we were watching the movie Trolls. My daughter loves the movie Trolls. And they were singing the song, and I stopped and I said, 21st night of September. That's Chip's Day. That's when we put her down. And then I just listened to the lyrics, and I was like, this is her song about entering heaven. So I try to play it for comfort and
Mm.
think about her eating what she wants in heaven, howling and making her beagle noises, and just being so happy now that she's, across that rainbow bridge. But
Mm.
that was her day. And, it wasn't easy, trying to pick what day a soul leaves
Of
Earth.
course. Yeah.
In the past, we took the dog in and she died that day. So we didn't get a choice.
Hmm.
And this time I knew things weren't right. She wasn't acting herself.
Hmm.
And so I called the vet and told him what was going on. And he said, well, when you decide to do it, I I don't think you're doing it too soon, but I don't want you to do it too late.
Okay.
And so that resonated with me. And then um, I called a veterinarian that specializes in hospice care and
Hmm.
just told her about the dog's symptoms and what was going on. And she was like, I think I agree. I think, this week is a good time for you to think about it. And I said, well, how do I pick? I've had 16 years with her.
Mm.
How do I pick when will be her last day? And how can it be that 16 years is coming down to a matter of hours, a
Mm.
matter of days? And so I guess now is a good time to bring up that her nickname was Goose.
Mm.
And that was because she used to curl up in the bed and twist her neck just she looked like a goose. And so that's what we called her. We called her the goose. And as she aged, we called her the gray goose. But
Mm.
I remember driving to daycare. It was a beautiful September afternoon. The sunroof was open. And I said, like, I'm just thinking, how do I decide? When do I know that it's her time to go? And a flock of geese flew over my car with the sunroof open, honking and flapping their wings. And I said, that's my sign.
Wow.
She's ready to fly.
What
It's
a
her
big
time to
sign.
go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it helped me with the guilt
Mm.
because I didn't feel guilt about putting her down because she had given me the sign to know
Hmm.
it was her time and she was ready to go and she's lived her life here on
Mm.
earth.
That is beautiful. And to receive a sign like that, just with everything with her nickname being Goose and the grey goose, I just think it's incredible. Like, and it couldn't be more clear. And also, it couldn't be more of a comfort for you in such a
Yes,
difficult, challenging decision-making time when you feel you've had 16 years. And how would you, on earth, do you pick a day, a time of a day? Because it's so unnatural for us. We've never had to do something like that before. Probably not many people, but I mean, it sounds like the kind of stars aligned and that it was the right time and it just felt right for you. Would that be right?
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt right in making the decision. Now,
Mm.
having to go through it I felt like I was living an out of body experience, having to
Mm.
drive her to the vet's office, having to carry her into the office. And I just felt like I was on autopilot, like I was just this robot
Hmm.
going through the motions because I couldn't believe that I was taking her there to put her down and take her for the last time. And we took her chocolates.
Mm.
My husband and I and my parents were her closest providers, and so the four of us went, and we each had a chocolate for her.
Hmm.
And she ate those chocolates like as if she had never eaten before. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like maybe I'm making the wrong choice. Like, how is she so happy and eager to eat the chocolates? And then we had one more left to give her. She wouldn't eat it.
Okay.
And the vet said, I think it's time. So
Mm.
we just played a song, a gospel song, and sent her up to heaven. And it was so hard leaving her, just walking away. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But I know she wasn't comfortable. She wasn't herself, and she was starting to be in pain.
Hmm.
Even with the pain medicine she was on, it was still making her uncomfortable to sleep at night. So
Hmm.
it needed to be done. But oh my gosh, I can't think of anything that's the only thing that is as difficult
Mm.
was my mother was in the ICU unexpectedly 4 months before my wedding, and it felt my mom ended up making it. It was a miracle. She's doing great, thank God, and we're very thankful. But that's the only thing I can compare this to is walking through the corridor of the ICU was
Hmm.
like walking through the entrance of this veterinary office um, because you just can't believe that that's what you're about to go do and say goodbye for the last time,
Mm.
even though you know it's the right thing.
Yeah, it's like you mentioned, it's that outer body experience. It's like this is not reality. Is this actually happening? Like this kind of feeling. And it like if you were to even describe what emotions were coming up for you around that day, how would you kind of articulate that to us?
Yeah. I mean, you talk a lot about the anticipatory grief.
Mm,
And when I knew that something was wrong when I would come home and she wouldn't howl with excitement and come up to see me, and she just didn't really have much of a reaction. And
mm-hmm,
I said, and then when she would eat, she would be panting. And so I knew something was wrong and I knew that her time was coming to a close.
mm,
And I know how silly this sounds, but I always felt like she would be immortal because I didn't think I could live without her. I didn't want to imagine life without her because it was just so painful
mm-hmm,
that I just never did. Whenever the thought came up, I pushed it away because it was too painful to even imagine life without her.
mm-hmm,
And now that it was getting closer and imminent, I mean, like I had always said, she can't leave because I can't make it without her. But I knew factually that couldn't be the way it was. So, I mean, I had difficulty eating. It was like I had a pit in my stomach. I would feed myself smoothies with protein to just get something down because I just didn't want to eat. I would be scared. One of us was always at home her last week because I was just scared to leave her in case something suddenly happened.
mm-hmm,
It was just, you knew it was happening, but it just didn't seem honestly, the week knowing what was happening and leading up to it and making those decisions was almost as bad as leaving her after she was put down.
mm,
That anticipatory grief and knowing that it was coming to a close and trying to say, oh my gosh, this is her last night. These are her last hours. And the hospice vet helped because she said, why don't you get her a hot towels or hot blankets out of the dryer and wrap her in them? And why don't you get her a vanilla ice cream at McDonald's and let her lick that and give her comfort? And
mm,
we did those things to help ease her, give her some more comfort in her last days. But I can't even, it was some of the worst emotional pain I've ever experienced.
mm,
The days leading up to her dying and the first few days, especially the first morning after waking up to the empty bed and not being able to take her out is some of the work. Again, the only thing I've had family members, grandparents pass,
mm-hmm.
friends, and the only thing that's come close to the emotional pain was when my mother was in the ICU and I thought I was going to lose her. That's
Yeah.
the only thing that's come close to the pain
Mm.
and uh, just disbelief of losing Chip.
Yeah. And it's like minute by minute, I can imagine in the last week. And it's like, did you find yourself getting support from the hospice nurse? And did you find that you were seeking that support, or were you kind of running on autopilot, or were you asking for support from family, friends during that time in the lead up?
I was trying, as far as trying to make the decision, I leaned on our vet and called them and the vet tech.
Hmm.
And I leaned on the hospice vet to help keep her comfortable and make the decision. So
Hmm.
I relied on our veterinary community to help make those choices. But as far as my emotional support, I guess my mom and dad came up to visit because they had been caregivers for Chip, and my husband was there, and we all just held one of us held her at all times. It was just
Mm,
like a round the clock. Somebody was with her on the couch or in the bed or giving her the little ice cream or wrapping her up.
mm,
So we just took turns being with her as much as we could in her final days and trying to think about our happy memories with her, look back at videos. I think
mm,
you had said too, a lot of folks that tend to focus on the last days and
mm,
forget the beauty of the years that we've had. And I
mm,
was thankful that not only did I have photos, but I had videos of her. I had videos of her when she was healthy, running, playing, sniffing, and acting herself. And I just look back at I went crazy and started downloading and uploading all her pictures to make sure if I lose my phone, I don't want to lose
yes, yeah.
her pictures and videos. So I was uploading them to places so that they could be safe as I was going through and
Mm,
watching and viewing them and thinking of our happy times together.
mm. And that's actually a beautiful way that you've just described of you processing the grief that you're feeling, during those days leading up. And that is a beautiful way to do it. And it can be difficult for people to do that because they can kind of, their brain can shut that down because it's so hard emotionally to do that. But that's incredible that, and you had so much support, which was amazing.
Yeah.
If you were to kind of, like you mentioned, looking at the relationship as a whole, not just the end of the relationship with Chip, could you pinpoint, I'm sure there's just hundreds, but could you pinpoint some of the most joyful or supportive memories or your favorite memories, maybe that she made you laugh uncontrollably? Is there anyone that would stand out for you of those memories that you'd feel comfortable sharing with us?
Yeah, she used to always try to find the sunbeams from the window. So, like,
Mm.
she would go lay on, even if she had a bed, if the sun was streaming through the window in a certain spot, she would go over to that. So I would move her little bed right under the ray of sunshine into the window, um, from the window, I mean, so she could be laying comfortably there. But she sought out the sun so much. One day we were driving down the interstate, and she was in the back seat in her little harness clipped to the seat belt. Somehow I must have not fastened it properly, but she got out. She got up to the console right near where the gear shift was and had her head up, was trying to like sunbathe and get the wind on her through the open sunroof while I'm driving down the interstate, and she's right by the gear shift. Oh, it was so funny. And I had to, exit immediately and get her back in the harness. But I said, "How on earth did you get out and come up here to get into the sun or the wind?" And something else she taught me that was totally her was, as a beagle, she used her voice to show so many emotions.
Mm.
She would howl when she was sad if I was out of the house. When it was time to eat dinner at 6 o'clock, if you did not have the bowl, she would throw her head back and howl at you. When you got home from work, she would go crazy making noise and howling at you. And as soon as you would let her out the crate, she was like a bull through the gate. So
Mm.
I love how she always sought out the sun, and she always used her voice to show her emotions, regardless of what
Mm.
emotion it was. She
Mm.
always made her voice be known. I think I'm very similar in that I'm an outgoing, strong person, just like she let her voice and her opinion be known.
Mm. That's that's amazing. That's like really specific examples of how her personality kind of shone through in your life. And she just sounds like a sun worshipping queen.
Yeah, a diva.
Yeah, that's beautiful though. And I think it's just amazing how a lot of people kind of say, oh, well, our animals are like non-verbal, but sometimes they can be pretty verbal and you can understand
So
what they're
so
saying.
verbal that that was the first sign I had that something was wrong, because
Yeah.
she wasn't verbal for the first
Okay.
time. And that's how
Mm.
I knew.
Okay.
I said to my mom, I said, something is not right. And she said, "You're right. She's slowing up."
Mm. You're so in tune with her, everything about her, even the little things that you just, and that's the way I think every pet parent, anyone I speak to, they're like, I just knew there was these subtle changes in their personality, their habits, because they're very scheduled, they like their routine, they like their habits, and I definitely feel that that's a universal, that people will say that that's how they first signify. And I think that that's where it can come in handy with, like you say, going to the vets and any veterinary techs and trying to describe that there is definitely something wrong. Can you do some checks? Can you do some scans? Whatever is needed, bloods. And then more often than not, I hear that most vets will say to pet owners, pet parents, that you know your pet best. So, and generally that's what I hear. And I think that that's when you know you have supportive kind of environment around you when they can say that, which is great as well. Would you kind of agree with that?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I loved our vet. And, when I thought about how to put her down, there's a company that comes to the house to
Mm.
put them down. And I thought about them, but I said, no, I want her to go to him because
Mm.
he knows her inside and out. And he followed up on all of her scans, would call me anytime to update me. And, you
Mm-hmm.
know, I loved our veterinary office so much. And the tech, when it came time to put her down and order the cremation and all of that, the tech gave me her personal number. And, I was having a tough time figuring out, well, what urn do I pick, and do I do cremation and all of that. And the vet tech said to me, if I had to come back in another life as a pet, I want you to be the owner. You did everything you could,
Oh, isn't that
everything you
lovely?
could. And
Mm.
it just brought me comfort because I knew that, like, if someone on the medical side is telling me that I couldn't have done any more, I couldn't have kept her here any longer, then I felt like I had
Mm.
done the best for her that I could. And the veterinary team that we have was just state of the art,
That's amazing. And
definitely.
what a supportive thing to hear. Like it's just it goes kind of beyond their remit of what they, what their job description goes. They just go above and beyond. And of course, I can't speak for every situation. Obviously, everyone's situation is different. So if anyone is listening that hasn't had that situation, and has had a negative experience, that can be devastating as well at the same time. But um, if you were to think about how Chip might have changed you as a person, or what is there some big learning that you feel that you of learnings? I'm sure, like I have had many, but if you were to kind of pick a couple to tell us about.
One is huge that stands out immediately.
Mm.
Um, so I'm a pediatric physical therapist. I'd been in the same job for 10 years. And I had to put Chip down on a Thursday. I took the day off to put her down. And the next morning, I knew I missed my Thursday clients. I had to see them. I had to try to make up them and see my Friday kids.
Hmm.
So that Friday morning, I ordered her urn and her little paw print in the clay, and I texted the veterinary tech I told you about and went back to work. And I work with special needs kids. And so I had to put a smile on my face and sing songs and get a child to walk with her walker. And
Mm.
after it was over, I went in the stairwell and just collapsed. And I was crying, and someone from my job came and asked what was going on. And I told them. And then after I made it through that day, that was a Friday, came home over the weekend, and I said to my husband, I am miserable in this job. And he said, I've known that. We've both known that, but you just keep pushing on.
Hmm.
And I said, you know what? Chip lived up until her last seconds. She ate that chocolate up until the last second when she was injected by the vet. I said, I'm only happy outside of work. And
Mm.
so while I was processing that grief, I was also processing, do I leave my job? And so she died on a Thursday. On Monday, I called my boss and I said, I'm very emotional because this has just happened.
Hmm.
But right now, I'm considering leaving my position. I have this many sick days left, and I will be taking them all. And in that time, I will be thinking about what's best for me and my family and processing the grief. And I know in many of your podcasts, you've talked about how people don't get time off of work for that grief. So it was a blessing for me that I was able to take those days
Hmm.
to find your podcast, because I found your podcast days after losing Chip, and talk to friends and journal and call my therapist up for an appointment.
Hmm.
Um, but I used those couple of weeks to really figure out what I wanted. And after those days were over, I left my job. Now I'm still a pediatric physical therapist. I still love what I do. I'm just doing it without the hour commute and in a different
Mm.
environment, a different setting where I feel appreciated. But I never thought, I think it took losing Chip for me to make such a monumental change after being
Mm.
in that position for a decade.
Mm.
And without Chip, I never would have sat down and really looked at what I wanted out of life in such a way,
Hmm.
and make sure that I'm not just living happily outside of work, because we need to try to be happy as much as possible if we can,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
enjoy ourselves and not just be miserable slogging through our days. And never did I think anything positive could come out of her loss.
Mm.
But I'm happy at my job now, and I'm so thankful. And that loss caused me to reevaluate my life.
Mm.
And I don't know if I would have ever done it without losing her. So, I
Wow.
mean, it just a
Yeah.
huge, leaving a job of 10 years was a huge decision. But and then I looked back and I said, man, I wish I had done it sooner because I could have had more time with her instead of being on the highway commuting. But my therapist says, and my therapist has also been lovely. She's non-judgmental. She doesn't,
Hmm.
I don't know whether or not she has a pet, but she values it as a real loss and doesn't judge me for saying it's just an animal. Never would she have said that. But she says, I can't look back at myself a few years ago with the lens I have now because I didn't know years ago when she was going to be gone. I didn't know. So she said, you know, you did the best with the tools that you had at the time.
Hmm.
And even though that's where I felt guilt. I felt guilt that I was working full time and managing an infant and young toddler in her last years of life instead of spending more time with Chip. But of course, I didn't know how much time I had left. And I do wish that I had left that job sooner
Hmm.
to have more time with Chip in her last year. So that's where I feel the guilt because you know, once you have a family and you're working full time, your time is limited. But I try not to feel guilt. And I think you had said maybe guilt is committing a crime or being, you know, doing something of the
To
sort.
cause
And
harm. Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And obviously, there was no intent for me to cause harm with my relationship to Chip, but that's where I've been struggling with guilt because I wish I could have made some of these changes sooner to
Mm.
enjoy my last years with her.
Yes. I hear you. I hear you. And it's similar situation happened to me. I don't know what it is about losses. And for me, experiencing multiple losses in a row,
Mm.
somehow I don't know the correlation of how it makes you reevaluate life. Maybe because our own happiness, our own contentness in life, it makes us really look at that with a finer lens. It makes us think, how can I reevaluate? How can I be happy? Because I think when our pets are in our life, well, for me, I can speak, you might be able to share your thoughts, Stephanie, but for me, they were like nearly my sole purpose, and a lot of my life revolved around them. So a lot of my happiness revolved around them, nearly because I was in a job that I was just like, oh, it's okay. I don't love it. I'm just powering through. But I have my dogs and they just make up for all of this. And then when they leave, of course, it makes us think, okay, I cannot do this without them. I'm miserable. So, so that's it. I don't know if you feel it, that might be the same thing, but I feel that that's the correlation, and it makes people move countries after different kinds of losses. So it's definitely it's hard to say that something good can come from such a devastating and heartbreaking loss, but this happens many times to a lot of people. So I think maybe that's the way the universe goes, or that's the way things are going in life for people. I don't know if you kind of agree with that. I go on a bit of a rant there, sorry.
No, that's okay. No, she definitely felt like she was my purpose. I mean, she was the one I came home to.
Hmm.
She was the only one I came home to for so long.
Mm.
And then in the pandemic, you know, as an extrovert, my hobbies are going out, doing group exercise classes, being with friends, traveling, going to
Mm.
concerts, like all of my, you know, and my husband is like, he likes gardening and reading and he's introverted. So like nothing really changed as much for him. But I'm like, I felt like so many of my hobbies and things of purpose. I hate coming back to COVID so much, but
Mm.
all of the things that I outside of the home that I felt were my purpose were
Mhm.
gone.
Mm.
And so even more so, like when I was at home before the pandemic, that was my purpose. But then in COVID, you were home all the time. So it's like I can't imagine if I hadn't had her because she got me. Sometimes I felt so depressed in the pandemic that, there were Monday to Friday, I had to get up and get on Zoom. I had to do physical therapy with special needs kids through the computer. But that was, I had to do that Monday to Friday. And then when the weekends came, I was like, well, what is my purpose? And my purpose was to get Chip up, to take her out, to feed her, to go to a park.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we? What new park can we try to go to today? Um, that was our purpose. And she, it brings up a memory that it's so silly, but we only had weekly trash pickup, and so we would walk over like the trash bags or the recycling to the dumpster. And her favorite thing was to go walking to the dumpster. She would just love to smell around. And I'm like, it brings me back in the pandemic how we would just say, "You ready to go to the dumpster, Chip?" And she would just love to go there. And I remember telling the vet, she's 13, and the vet, I said, we're walking not all at once, but like 3 to 4 miles a day. And he was like, "You're kidding." And I said, "No, it's not super quick, but we're getting our steps in." And I think that the pandemic, as hard as it was, might have added years to her life, because we walked her ever more than ever before. She was with
Mm.
us all the time. But
Wow.
yeah, she definitely, as soon as I was home, she was my purpose. Like you've said before, you build your schedule around them.
Mm.
People would say, "Oh, I can walk her so you can go out." No, I don't want you to walk her unless I'm in a bind or something. I want to go home. I want to be with her. I want to walk her.
Mm.
I've chosen to have her, and this is what I choose to do with my afternoon.
Mm.
So your life, "Oh, I have to get home. I've got to hang up this call or whatever. It's time for her to eat. I've got to feed her." She has to get
Mm.
her medicine this many hours on an empty stomach. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
and then when they're gone, you're like, the routines are gone. And
Yeah.
it's like, I'm used to giving her a pill at a certain time, or taking her out, or feeding her.
Mm.
Another funny memory that comes up. So I'm a big sports fan, and this brings me up to Chip. So we would give her medicine with, bread or peanut
Mm.
butter or something, and we would be watching on the couch a game, and I might get rowdy and be jumping and screaming at the TV. Well, if Chip had had her medicine and her snack with it, her little treat with it, she would get up and look at me and just walk on up the stairs like, "I've had enough. I've had my last treat. I don't want to hear this hooping and hollering anymore. I'm going to bed." And so she would just walk up, and then she would peer between the balcony railings and
Mm.
said, "Are you," like as if to say, "Are you coming up? All right, well, I'm going to bed."
That is a good one. That's
But
funny.
yeah, your routines revolve around
Mm.
your pets.
Mm. Completely, completely. Yeah. And I think that's such a difficult, challenging change for people to try and navigate that uh, people don't even think about. They don't even realize that that's going to be like one of the most difficult things. And for you, I suppose, processing after Chip's death, did you, I obviously you had some time off work, which is amazing to hear, and you gave yourself that space and time. What helped you, or what, where did you turn for support? Was it family? Was it, obviously, you mentioned therapy, which was amazing. What did you find most helpful that might help listeners?
Yeah, well, you, first of all, I mean, like I said, I had messaged you, like I would be like eagerly waiting for your next podcast to come out, because I identified so well with you, and I really appreciated you saying your feelings are valid. Pet loss is difficult. And so
Mm.
hearing you talk about it and share those things, like it was like, wow, I'm not alone. So that helped. I had a couple close friends that had also gone through it, or one friend actually was going through it with her cat at about the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked, and it wasn't even just talking through text. It was real phone calls, which nowadays don't happen so much, but really talking to somebody on the other line who had been through it and completely understands the importance of pets. But
Mm-hmm.
my therapist um, had me actively go through. So I had a therapy session on Zoom the day that my husband picked up Chip's ashes.
Mm-hmm.
And my therapist had me go through like an active, I guess, reliving of her being put down, and what I felt like. And just the tears just flowed. And she was like, "How are you feeling? What do you wish you could have told yourself? Give yourself a hug." And we went through and just cried the whole hour, just going through and actively like processing it. And then also my therapist told me to journal, and I read her my journals in therapy sessions, and she said, "You're doing a beautiful job of storytelling. What I want you to also do is write how you're feeling, because until you're writing the feelings,
Mm.
it's going to be hard to get through this. You're talking about beautiful times you had together and all her traits, but you have to say, I feel this way about it." So I challenged myself to go back and try to circle feelings
Yes.
as I was journaling and not just write about, oh, I wish I could touch your ears again or something like that.
Hmm.
And that all of those things combined helped, and getting outside in nature and looking for geese, really. Oh, there's something I have to mention too, that I went near a pond near my house, and there were these two women while I was walking, and there were some geese in the pond, and the women stopped me. These were strangers.
Mm.
And they said, "We're used to seeing this group of geese. Usually there are about four, but today there are five. I don't know where this fifth goose came from. I could
Oh
not make
God.
it up. I could not make it up that these two strangers
Mm.
grabbed me and made that comment." And I said, "Oh my gosh, it's Chip. She's come back as a goose. She is watching over me. I've seen geese when I'm driving, crossing the road. I had to stop. I took a picture while I was stopped in the road. Geese were in the crosswalk. They are everywhere now."
Mm.
And I also I found a book, and it might sound crazy to some, but it brought me a lot of comfort
Mhm.
about pet signs in the afterlife,
Mm.
and how, pets communicate with us, and the stronger your bond is on earth, the stronger it will be then. And so I believe it says all you have to do is open your heart to believe. I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen? You open your heart to
Exactly.
believe
Mm.
that a goose is being put in your path to make you, remind you that your pet is okay. What's the worst that can happen
Yeah.
if you believe that? Because it truly brought me comfort to
Mm.
to be looking for the geese.
Hmm.
It really did.
That's amazing because I would totally be on the same page as you with that about believing. And I remember I think I did a post or put up a story on Instagram and asked people, what are their signs that they've received, and so many people have received different, all kinds of different signs, and I think that's beautiful. And like, those people are believers, and they will ask for a sign and they will talk to their pet. And I think it's okay, and it's not crazy, and it's not woo-woo. And if it helps us to process, if it helps us to feel better, and if we're doing it in private, we don't even have to tell anybody that we're doing that. It can be
That's true.
completely unique to us. It's like a secret that we have with us and our pet, and it's beautiful, really, I think. So,
Right.
yeah, so thank you, because it's incredible that you receive so many signs from Chip. And I think that I hope that gives listeners some hope that if they maybe want to be more open-minded about it, that it's a possibility, it's a way of connecting with your pet, and it's a way of getting comfort and trying to kind of keep that relationship open, because the relationship is still there. It's just the physical
Exactly.
aspect. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. And there's something else too that I had never celebrated before, but there's a Mexican holiday, Dia
Mm.
de los Muertos. And if you've ever seen the Disney movie Coco, it's the children's version of this holiday that right after Halloween, on the Day of the Dead, they put up an ofrenda, which is like an offering table for deceased people or pets.
Mm.
And we made one for Chip, and we put up her picture on the altar, and you fill it with things that she loved, her toys, peanut butter, snacks, whatever. And that night she came to me for the first time in a dream, and she was glowing and golden. And I
Mm.
said, I believe in this now, because I really do think that she came back to visit me on the Day of the Dead, because I put up that little altar for her, and you get marigold flowers, which are supposed to be very fragrant flowers. And I
Mm.
said, well, with a beagle nose, she could have tracked they're supposed to come back to your home. I said, the marigolds led her home.
Oh,
So
wow,
that is a
Stephanie.
really big comfort.
Mm, that is
So we
beautiful.
celebrate that holiday for the first time. I really would love to go to Mexico to see it in person, but I believe it now, because she had never appeared to me in dream before
Mhm.
until the night that we put her offering up on the table.
That is so interesting. That really is. And Ozzy has appeared. in my dreams a few times and very vividly. And I feel that if you're open to that, or if it's not even like, I think it's more like I would love if you popped into my dream at some point and then you kind of wait for the magic to happen. And it kind of happens. It's so lovely and it's so comforting. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night crying, but crying with happiness because I
Mm-hmm.
felt that he had come back and I was touching his ears and it was very vivid and lovely, very comforting. But yeah, I think maybe going to Mexico for you is something how you can honor Chip's memory. And that leads me to one of my final questions for you, really, is since Chip has left this earth, what things have you kind of done to honor her memory, or is there certain places you go each year for the anniversary? How do you kind of, memorialize Chip?
Yep, I'm wearing a necklace with her picture on it right now.
Beautiful.
And
Oh,
I made a pillow with her,
oh.
about her size with her picture on it, which I hug onto. And my daughter really loves to hug her. And she says Chip is with God. Chip has her angel wings. So,
Oh God, lovely.
yeah, we have pictures of her all over the house, and we talk about her. We play that song, the September song by the band Earth, Wind and Fire.
Mm,
I was really worried this year about the holiday, or last year, I guess it was her first holidays, but her first birthday and
mm,
her first day of passing. I was worried about how I was going to react.
mm,
And so her birthday was June 29th. And so, like, the whole month of June, of course, her birthday's like at the end of the month. So I'm like anxious about it the whole month as soon as the
mm,
calendar turns to June. And so I'm like, what am I going to do? And I wrote a journal and I had a good cry that morning. I also have her birthday, 6/29/07, ingrained in my memory because when I went to go pick up her Prozac, had to always give the patient's date of birth. So that's how I know.
mm,
But that day I said, well, I don't know what we're gonna do. Like how I don't want to be sad. I don't want to be depressed in the house all day. And so we decided that we were going to celebrate it just like any other person's birthday.
mm,
So we decided to go play mini golf, and go out. And then my husband and I toasted a bottle of Grey Goose vodka. We had a little drink that we made with Grey Goose to honor our Grey Goose.
mm,
And of course, like I said, I did have my good cry and my journaling in the morning, but then tried to make it a positive experience like anyone else's birthday.
mhm,
And then on the day of her passing, September 21st, for the first time this year was our first anniversary. And I talked to my therapist about it. And my husband had a conference in Jamaica over that weekend. And I said, well, what better time for me to, to get away and try to not be so focused. But my therapist said, um, give yourself time to grieve and journal or think or cry however you need to, but set a
mhm,
timer on it. 15 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you feel. And then after that timer is up, try to move on because you can get stuck in a mode of suffering where you're just downward spiraling for the rest of the day. So she said, you do need the time to grieve. You do need to recognize that that is the day she left.
mhm,
And after that timer and that grieving process is complete, then move on. And so I remember being at the airport crying and thinking about her, writing about her. And my friend said to me, you're going to the airport and you're getting on a plane. And on that plane, you'll be closer than ever to her in heaven. What
mm,
close you will never be able to be as close. And so I thought about that. And as soon as we got there, we wrote her name in the sand and we let the ocean waves pass over it to honor her. But I think it's a good to have a combination of allowing yourself to grieve,
mm,
process whatever emotions you need to, and not just skipping over it and pushing past it,
mm,
but trying to find a private time if you need to go away to a room by yourself, or if you grieve in with others, whatever you feel comfortable with, and setting a timer to it so you don't spiral and
mm.
trying to do some things because, like my therapist taught me, which was a huge lesson, we can grieve and find joy. Just
Yes.
because we're finding joy in the day
Mm,
doesn't steal the bond we had with our pet, doesn't diminish the love we have for them. You
yes.
can have grief and joy coexisting.
Mhm,
So trying to do both of those. I think having an action plan too of we are going to the mini golf, or we're doing something to get out of the house, or we're going on this trip, and we're going on the beach.
Yes.
Helps so that you're not just stuck in the house wondering what do you do, but maybe coming up with something in advance helped me.
Mm. Oh my God, that's
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah, they are such amazing ideas and such amazing takeaways for anyone who's listening, especially the part where you learned that putting a timer on your grief on that particular day. And it's not that, and like you say, it's not about pushing it down for the rest of the day. It's giving yourself space privately to let that emotion out in whatever way you need to, journaling, crying, movement, whatever way people can release that grief. But we do have to live in this world and we do have to function, and getting a reprieve from the grief is important as well. And going to do something that brings us joy or happiness or brings a smile to our face shouldn't cause guilt to come up, because we're allowing ourselves to grieve, but then we're like, grief, you're still here within me, but right now I'm going to go on this plane and I'm going to go on this trip and experience some joy in my life. So I think that, thank you for sharing that, because that is absolutely so important for people to hear, and a beautiful way to just let them coexist together, because otherwise, how would we continue in life? How would we grow from the experience, or how would we create a new life for ourselves? Like you mentioned, reevaluating our life and going into this new chapter, a new adventure, like you've basically told us as well, which is
Hmm.
amazing. Thank you for
It's like
sharing
what
that.
you said, I think in some of your earlier podcasts, that, we're not taught how to grieve, and we are told just fill up your calendar and stay busy, and time will heal it, and you don't have to do anything, and it'll get better in time. And
Mhm.
yes, it's nice to have things on the calendar so we continue living and having joy, and uh,
Mm.
but and at the same time, we do have to sit with those hard, difficult, terrible feelings.
Mhm.
And it's not something we're taught to do, because we're just told to skip over it and time automatically will make it better.
Yes. Yeah. And it's a terrible myth, but it's a myth that was ingrained in us, unfortunately. But anyone who's listening, and hopefully from you sharing everything you've shared with us, Stephanie, people will know that that's not true and that's the opposite. And it's all about, like you say, it's about really honing in on how does it make me feel and writing that down. We can talk about all the happy memories and all the places we went with our pet, but it's what emotion did I feel when I said my final goodbye to my
Mhm.
pet, or what came up, what did I feel in my body when I found out the prognosis? Or it's really getting down to those questions that are really painful and that we want to avoid writing about, but that's how we process what happens to us in pet loss. So I think that that's super important, and you've definitely highlighted that incredibly well on this podcast. And I know that anybody listening would really have got so much from everything that you've shared. And I appreciate that it's deeply personal for you to share your relationship that you had with Chip and everything about that. So thank you so much for taking the time to share that with us. And I've just been in a state of like awe to just listen, and to I'm honored to have listened and learned more about your relationship with Chip, because they are sacred and they're special. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. And
Yeah.
thank you for having me. And thank you to Chip for all that she gave
Yes.
me and allowed me, so that I can hopefully help others.
Amazing. Chip is the star.
Yes, exactly. Her vocal star.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And for anybody listening, if you have any takeaways from this episode, be sure to message me on Instagram or send an email. And if you have any requests for any future episode topics, I would love to know. And be sure to follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on, because this will spread this podcast to the people that need to hear it the most. And until next time, take care and chat soon.